right now, a public attempt to protect commercial shipping might actually end up widening the target set in the Middle East, moving away from just military assets and vessels and extending to domestic bridges and power plants. The central question surrounding this ongoing maritime crisis is really this: does threatening domestic infrastructure actually deter maritime attacks, or does it just kick off a broader, uncontrollable cycle of retaliation? In this analysis, we are going to examine the strategic logic, the operational context, and the severe escalation risks currently unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz. We'll be breaking down 6 key areas today. First, the new retaliation formula. Second, the shift from truce to blockade. Third, commercial shipping under fire. Fourth, distinguishing facts from claims. Fifth, the dual choke point crisis. And finally, indicators of future trajectories. Let's start with part 1, the new retaliation formula, and how maritime operations are now being explicitly linked to domestic infrastructure. The core tension of the current crisis really crystallized on July 22, 2026. On that date, U.S. President Donald Trump issued a declarative public statement, which was widely reported by outlets including the Times of Israel. The exact quote reads, "Any time the Islamic Republic of Iran shoots at a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, the United States will bomb and destroy one bridge or power plant." This represents a severe policy shift. It establishes a completely unprecedented, declarative linkage between attacks on commercial vessels at sea and retaliatory strikes on dual-use domestic infrastructure on land. Now, it's really important we make a critical distinction here. There is a very real semantic and strategic difference between establishing a deterrence baseline and actually executing a military policy. A declared consequence is publicly intended to alter an adversary's cost-benefit calculations, hoping to shape their future behavior. That remains distinct from an executed strike. However, just setting this baseline immediately shifted regional dynamics. Senior Iranian officials defied the ultimatum, warning that any strike on its domestic infrastructure would compel a powerful and decisive response targeting regional energy facilities and U.S. interests. So the threshold for broader conflict has now been formally articulated by both sides. Moving to part 2, from truce to blockade, and the collapse of the June ceasefire. To fully understand that July 22nd infrastructure threat, we have to look back at the rapid breakdown of regional stability that led up to it. On June 10, a U.S. airstrike hit the drifting tanker Settebello, killing 3 Indian crew members and really highlighting the extreme operational risks in the region. That incident led to a Pakistan-brokered Memorandum of Understanding, providing an interim truce from June 17th to July 8th. But that ceasefire collapsed quickly. By July 14th, U.S. Central Command officially resumed a naval blockade of Iranian ports. Hostilities escalated fast, with U.S. airstrikes expanding on July 17th and commercial tankers being struck near Oman on July 20. It's this specific sequence of deterioration that culminated in the July 22nd infrastructure threat. Following the collapse of that truce, the sheer intensity of military operations absolutely skyrocketed. By July 23rd, the U.S. military reported conducting 12 consecutive nights of airstrikes aimed at degrading Iranian maritime and logistical capabilities. At the same time, Iranian state media claimed these strikes hit bridges in Hormozgan province and infrastructure in Chabahar port, reportedly resulting in dozens of casualties. So the operational tempo shifted dramatically, moving away from diplomacy and right back to sustained, reciprocal, kinetic action across the theater. That brings us to part 3. Commercial shipping under fire, focusing on the tangible disruption in the strait. This escalation isn't just rhetorical. It has produced tangible, confirmed hazards for commercial mariners. On July 20, 2 Greek-managed Dynacom tankers, the Kavomalias and the Akaluz, were struck by projectiles while transiting the contested waters near Qamzar, Oman. The Kavomalias suffered a severe engine room fire, forcing a total crew evacuation that was assisted by Omani authorities. This is a confirmed incident, and it firmly underscores the severe risk profile facing any vessel attempting to navigate the strait right now. The crucial point for analysts is how this physical risk translates into commercial paralysis. According to data published by Clarksons Research on July 20, daily vessel transits through the Strait of Hormuz plummeted to an estimated 12 crossings per day. To put that into perspective, daily transits were hovering around 125 prior to the outbreak of the conflict. The maritime industry's response has been one of immediate hesitation. Reports indicated that nearly 385 vessels were anchored off the coast of Oman, just waiting to see if safe passage could be restored. Consequently, energy flows are being drastically squeezed. Crude oil volumes passing through this vital choke point collapse to an estimated 1.5 million barrels per day. That is a staggering drop from the pre-conflict average of 15 million. This supply bottleneck has dramatically driven up insurance war risk premiums, and it triggered a surge in global Brent crude futures. So this isn't just a localized maritime issue anymore. The economic shockwaves of the standoff, from shipping delays to rising global energy costs, are already measurable on a global scale. Part 4. Distinguishing facts from claims as we try to navigate the fog of war. When analyzing a conflict like this, it is absolutely essential not to conflate verified data with partisan wartime narratives. Looking at the evidence, the strikes on the Dynacom tankers and the resumption of the U.S. naval blockade are confirmed facts. However, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' assertion that it forced 3 U.S.-backed tankers to retreat on July 23 is currently classified as a claim, as it lacks independent corroboration. Similarly, Iranian claims of striking U.S. bases in Kuwait and Jordan remain unverified. And while Israeli media reported U.S. intentions to deploy heavy bombers to strike underground Iranian facilities, this operational intent remains officially unconfirmed by the U.S. government, categorizing it firmly as unknown. Furthermore, the very status of the waterway itself is entirely disputed. U.S. Central Command asserts the Strait of Hormuz remains an open international waterway, and they tout the blockade as highly effective. Juxtapose that with the IRGC, which claims the strait is completely closed and strictly under sovereign Iranian control. The reality is that physical and legal control remains heavily contested, and reduced commercial traffic alone does not independently verify either side's claim of total dominance. Moving to Part 5, the dual choke point crisis and the squeezing of global energy flows. While the primary theater is obviously the Strait of Hormuz, a secondary concurrent maritime front has emerged in the Red Sea. Yemen's Houthi forces declared a strict naval embargo against Saudi Arabia, and on July 22, the Saudi flag's tanker En Salia was struck by a projectile near Jizyan, triggering a fire on its bow, a fact confirmed by the Saudi press agency. The Houthis framed this embargo as direct retaliation for Saudi airstrikes on Sana'a airport. It's vital to maintain analytical precision when looking at this. While expert assessments clearly note a broad strategic alignment between Tehran and Houthi forces, direct operational command is a different matter entirely. The extent to which Tehran directly ordered the specific Houthi attack on the Ensalia, as opposed to the Houthis acting autonomously on their own localized retaliatory motives, remains an unverified unknown. Yes, concurrent crises increase the strain on global shipping, but analysts cannot automatically assume a unified, centralized command structure without primary public evidence. Finally, Part 6. Indicators of future trajectories, weighing deterrence against escalation. Based strictly on the current evidence, analysts are looking at several competing trajectories. First, deterrence and standoff, where the U.S. infrastructure threat actually alters calculations, reducing attacks and allowing a limited resumption of trade. Second, an escalation spiral, where Iran tests the red line, the U.S. strikes a power plant, and Iran retaliates against Gulf energy hubs, widening the war. Third, shadow fleet adaptation, where mainstream shipping abandons the region entirely, leaving only risk-tolerant, high-cost shadow operators. And fourth, wider regional interaction, where the Red Sea and Gulf fronts increasingly synchronize. Analytical rigor requires refusing to predetermine which of these scenarios will inevitably occur. So, what exactly should observers be looking for? Here are a few specific observable data points you can track in the coming weeks. Step 1. Monitor maritime transit counts through authorities like Clarksons. Rising counts would indicate stabilized passage. Step 2. Track the execution of or restraint from domestic infrastructure strikes. The very moment a power plant or bridge is verified as targeted, this crisis moves into an entirely new phase. Step 3. Observe any regional diplomatic mediation. A return to mechanisms like that Pakistan-brokered MOU would indicate an attempt to find an off-ramp. In closing, the known facts are stark. A U.S. blockade is active, commercial vessels are burning, maritime traffic has collapsed, and a declarative threat against domestic infrastructure has been officially issued. Yet the ultimate control of the strait, the true operational hierarchy of regional forces, and whether a public threat will successfully deter violence or trigger a devastating retaliatory spiral all remain deeply uncertain. The focus must remain steadfastly on objective data rather than predetermined political conclusions. Keep a close watch on those maritime transit counts and the infrastructure strike reports. They are going to be the truest indicators of whether this global choke point stabilizes.
Ultimately, we are left with one critical, unresolved question. Will an unprecedented threat against domestic infrastructure successfully force a return to maritime peace, or is it the very spark that ignites a wider, uncontrollable regional war?